where do we start?
Yeah. So when did you first become involved with or interested in Russia, and why?
Well, let's see. I mean, I had been director of the peace movement for a while for something called the Survival Summer, which was a coalition of all the peace and environmental groups in winter of 79. It started 1980, and then the peace movement just took off, as you know.
Right. Yeah.
So in 1980, I was working. I was trying to put that together. Very frustrated by the political games being played to control that movement by kind of the old established peace groups like the American Friends Service Committee, who were more Stalinist than Stalin. And, but I mean, look, the story is interesting. And I was growing pot at the time up in Northern California. Had gone to Europe in the spring of 79, which is when the European nuclear disarmament movement exploded. Huge demonstrations in Berlin, Frankfurt, and London. And nothing was happening in the United States.
Yeah.
There was an anti-nuclear energy movement, which I was never a part of. And there was kind of a taboo. You weren't allowed to talk about nuclear war stuff. There was kind of an unspoken taboo in the energy movement that were just on energy. You may know this stuff.
Right.
But by then, you know, with what was happening, we had moved we moved the Pershing missiles into to the border with East Europe, and they moved their SS-24s. And the headlines in the papers in Europe when I was there in the spring of 79 was, we're on the verge of World War III because of these missiles being moved in and all the rhetoric and Ronald Reagan and all that. I came back and wrote a little 2-page paper calling for something like Vietnam Summer or Mississippi Freedom Summer. I was calling for a summer campaign against the war. And so I was barefoot, living without electricity, growing pot, and all of a sudden I became national director of the peace movement. It was kind of ridiculous. But so I called a meeting of all these organizations that, you know, participate in this thing. It's an industry. But right before I went there, I walked by a television set. Oh, you may know this guy. And I saw, what was his name? Wald, the guy at MIT who, I can't think of his name now.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
George Wald. No, George Wald, somebody else. He was a Nobel Prize
there, and who? The guy who was a linguist.
Chomsky.
No.
Yeah. Chomsky. Anyway, I saw this guy who he stayed at my house when he was in. I knew this guy pretty well, and he was at an anti-war rally.
Yeah.
Speaking on PBS, which was crazy. I mean, we never at that time there were no anti-establishment things that were happening on American television. And here was this a live coverage of a demonstration, 200,000 people after 3 Mile Island. And Ralph Nader had organized in Washington. I was blown away and then came Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and all these other people.
Right.
And I went, how did this get done? You know?
Yeah.
So I looked up the guy who did it, Kim Spencer, more important than me, I would say. He's the inventor of space bridges. Anyway, I looked him up because I wanted to find out how he pulled that off. It's an amazing story, actually, and I won't bore you with it now. But I quickly decided we could get more done on the war issue with Russia, working in a small group with television, than I could get done in the peace movement as it was. Actually, that's a phenomenon that I think is fascinating. I think I've written about this once before, but it's worth looking into. it was groups of small groups of people who just took it on their own to organize. It was very decentralized, what was it called? That little old lady in Western Massachusetts who went around and started the nuclear freeze. Remember the nuclear freeze?
Right.
There were a lot of things like that.
Right.
Small groups of people who just took it on their own to go national or go over to Russia and make friends. And Hickman's a great example.
Well, that was Joel Schatz's story.
Joel Schatz. I mean, there are a million great stories like that. So I basically quit as national director early in 1980 and started working.
What was the organization you quit at?
Called Survival Summer. It was the coalition.
Summer.
I mean, it's not a big thing. I think largely it was a failure, but it was the first coalition. We had 400 cities organized. We had offices in 400 cities, and it never got to be like Mississippi Freedom Summer or even Vietnam Summer.
Right.
But out of that came the freeze and all these other initiatives. So it was important. And then I stopped, went back to growing pot for a while, and got my pot crop got ripped off, and I was unemployed. I needed a job, so I called Kim up and I said, and Kim was already then doing these space bridges.
Right.
So he asked me to come in and help him raise money for these for the space bridges. So I went over to Russia for Kim. They were doing Nuclear Winter, or one of those space bridges. By the way, all those space bridges are now on YouTube. Kim has uploaded them all to YouTube. There's a Space Bridge channel, I think. They're fascinating to watch now.
They must be.
They are fascinating.
Right.
I mean, look at Capital to Capital, which is the one I organized, and you'll be blown away by some of that. Just it's amazing how much the world has changed in such a short time. Went over there, and it hit me that the Russians felt inferior. There was a certain superiority-inferiority complex I thought that Russia had as a great power.
Uh-huh.
And they wanted to be recognized as an equal to the United States.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we got to get the parliaments to talk to each other. That would be a breakthrough. I knew that would mean a lot to them. And anyway, that we organized that, and it just took off like crazy and had a big impact.
Right.
A series called Capital to Capital that we did with Peter Jennings and ABC.
And the contacts you had in Russia were through Kim, or how did you work?
Kim through Hickman, and basically all this stuff started with this parapsychology stuff,
right?
Whatever that was called, with guys that bent forks and did all. Because the Russians were doing a lot of research. You know this story better than I do.
Right.
So that's where it started, and then there was a guy named Joseph Golden.
Yeah.
Did you know Joseph?
I didn't know him. I have seen, I think Jim has talked about him. He was prominent in that podcast. Joel talked about him. So he seemed to be kind of ubiquitous within this movement.
He was just we'll probably never know who he really was. He was put in mental institutions several times.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was political repression or if I think he was just crazy.
Okay.
And needed it. He was sort of Joel's patron. He was head of the Academy of Sciences.
Okay.
Velikov. Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay.
Velikov once told me that Joel was crazy. That it wasn't political repression. He just needed to go in,
Yeah.
He had wild ideas, and he understood this new technology of satellite television, that could be used, that could leap across geographic boundaries and ideological boundaries, and which was the same thing Kim had figured out, Kim Spencer. So Hickman put them together,
Yep.
and the rest is history. They started producing these things, and then Vladimir Posner got involved, and interestingly, the producers in Gosteleradio, and this is I write about in that chapter in my book. You'll get this story, so I won't go into detail, but there were like 2 or 3 people who worked with Posner and stuff, and they took the techniques and things learned from in the production of this, and then produced Vzglad, the news program that captured 90% of the audience and became the national news program and made state television irrelevant. And I would argue that's the most important factor in the transformation of the Soviet Union was television. But that the roots of that television transfer came from the space bridges. So you can trace back that huge transformation when Gorbachev has glasnost and opens up that space, and these guys who had worked on the space bridges then start producing Vzglad and other programs. Of course, then it gets corrupted, and one of the 3 guys gets assassinated, and I think Lubimov, one of the other guys, is probably a top KGB general now. It's hard to know where it all went, but it probably had more to do with opening up the Soviet Union than anything else.
And your part in that was to sort of be the fixer, go-between, producer, whatever, of these program on the space bridge.
And when you say you, I mean Internews, certainly. My own personal involvement was mostly around Capital to Capital, but then the creation of Internews in Russia, where we started, I think there were eventually 10,000 TV stations that we were involved in our efforts.
10,000?
It was, well, no, I guess it was 2,000 in Russia.
Yeah.
And it was 10,000 overall outside of Russia itself. But there were 2,000 independent stations that we helped get started.
So
and a woman that, if you can interview her, is the key to all of this, is a woman named Manana Aslamazian. Manana is the mother of independent television in Russia.
And she's a Russian citizen?
She's actually Armenian. She lives in Moscow. She's a Russian citizen.
Right.
Born in Armenia. A force of nature. I was invited to one of the early meetings of the Glasnost Foundation.
Yeah.
This is Gorbachev's crown jewel. This is the thing he cared the most about. He creates this foundation and puts Yegor Yakovlev in charge. Yegor was his partner. He's the one who really educated Gorbachev and became his chief of ideology. And Yegor Yakovlev was head of this foundation. I was invited to one of their meetings, all old white guys. And then they had like one woman as sort of like the executive secretary. She ran the whole thing.
Yeah.
Blew me away. I mean, she just ran this thing with these top level guys. And I traded them. I went to the director and I said, I'll give you a Macintosh computer if you let me hire Manana. And he did. I traded him a computer for Manana, and then she organized 2,000 TV stations.
Oh my God. So what year was that? Even roughly. Pre into Soviet Union?
I would say, about the time you were there, 83, something like that, 84. So it was before, when does Gorbachev come into power?
Gorbachev doesn't come in until, I think, 86.
Oh, it's that late?
Yeah, and the Soviet Union
goes right after that.
Continues until 1990,
yeah.
December 25th. So
it would have been the late
Late 80s. So you founded Internews
in 82.
In 82, but Internews Russia was when?
That must have been about 85 or so.
Yeah. And it was an official organization?
Yeah.
It was recognized.
They eventually closed it down under Putin. He sent in his masked guys, and we had 400 employees there at the time. It was a big operation.
Yeah.
And all the first networks came out of that, Ren TV and all these things. They all were involved. Manana was at the center of all independent television. But she made a decision, or it might have been Evelyn, I forget, but somebody there made a smart decision to stay out of Moscow itself.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Moscow was losing control, but it started in the periphery.
Right.
And we knew the mafia in Russia would and they did. They killed most of the people who tried to poke their head up too high.
Yeah.
It just got too crazy there. But outside of Moscow, what happened actually, Evelyn may have mentioned a woman named Liz Hassey to you. Does that name strike you?
Yeah, yes.
We worked with her. She wasn't, I don't think, officially part of Internews, but we worked with her. She was a lawyer, kind of like yourself, a lawyer went over there.
Yeah.
And we had heard a rumor that there was an independent station somewhere in Russia. And Wade Green, do you know the name? Wade was one of the big funders, worked for the Rockefeller family. He gave us a grant to go search to see if we could find what independent stations there might be.
Yeah.
So we sent out 6 people all over Russia, and we discovered 200 independent stations.
Well, again, what year was this?
God, I knew you'd ask me that.
I mean, it must be after the Soviet Union dissolved. Has to be.
No, you still had the Soviet Union, because we were real involved, and we had a big role to play when Yeltsin got up on the tank, and
so
we were still there. There
were independent TV stations under in Soviet times.
Yeah, they were losing power out in the periphery. People were going to East Berlin, and for $8 you could get a little thing that you could plug into the back of your VCR and could turn it into a transmitter. So they'd go to East Berlin, they'd buy these videotapes, mostly pornography and stuff,
right?
Come back, and in these apartment complexes, for $8, you could become a broadcaster to 200,000 people in your apartment complex. And because they were all hardwired and into one, that's how a lot of these places started.
I see.
But yeah, things started going independent before the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Okay. And so and what does it mean that you had?
Let me just stop there a second. It would be worth, and I won't be able to do dates and stuff, but I would suspect there's an interesting story. In fact, I know there's an interesting story here, that the breakup of the Soviet Union had a lot to do with independent television.
Right.
So that you start in places like Latvia having independent TV. And so the political breakup of the Soviet Union happens after independent television starts broadcasting in these places.
Yeah.
Ukraine is a great example of that.
Right. Well, I can understand that on the periphery. So you had this more of the national, what ended up being national independence movements. So I can see that there was less control and more ferment. And
look at Ukrainian television, in their own language.
Yeah.
That happens before there's political emancipation. You get first, in your own language, national television happening,
right?
National independence.
So when you say you found 200 stations, it was throughout the Soviet Union, but it wasn't necessarily Russia. It was maybe
it was the Soviet Union. It was Kazakhstan and et cetera. A lot of them in Kazakhstan. but we invited them to a conference in Moscow, and none of these guys, they all thought they were unique. They all thought they were the only ones. And suddenly they're together in a conference room with 200 people all doing the same thing, and a movement started. It just boomed after that.
Huh. And how did that, so that movement was coalesced around Internews, and what exactly did it mean? Were they sharing programming? Were they sharing experience?
Eventually, yes. Eventually they created networks.
Yeah.
They shared programming. I mean, at the end of it, it was so big and sophisticated. We were laying the last mile in places for stations.
Wow.
They had, toward the end, they had a content management system. One of the things that changed was under the Soviet Union, you had no local. If you were in Smolensk or something, you don't know what's happening in any other town.
Right.
The only news is national.
Yeah.
It's coming from Moscow.
Right.
And so there might be a story that's happening there, but it's on the national news. Local news changed that for the city you're in.
Right.
Then once we began to connect those dots, and we had a common content management system. So every day an editor would come into there and he'd have a printout of here are the local news stories from all the cities in Russia. And they could cover each other's stories and share the video. And suddenly you have this interlocking network of television stations.
Wow.
But the woman who knows that, this is all Manana. If you can get to Manana, I'll send you.
Okay.
I'll send Manana's.
How would I find Manana?
I'm going to send you her email.
All right, great. And so the KGB just didn't realize the importance of this?
Well, I can't speak for that. I don't.
Well,
really
I know you can't, but
I would think they would have been all over this.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to control something like this. What you have you have a steel mill in Tomsk.
Yeah.
And the steel mill wants its own TV station because you can get away with it now. It's just, how do you stop that? They're the big player there.
Right. Okay. And
plus you have Gorbachev.
Yeah.
And Glasnost and Perestroika. Yeah. I mean, this is a new era, and he's opening up to this.
Right. And so this is a movement that sort of bubbles up from the bottom, and you provided some forum to help bring it together a bit.
And training. I mean, and then you get money pouring in to support the training of journalists and the development of these stations. It's a huge story, almost entirely untold.
Yeah.
I mean, I went on the 10th anniversary of Manana's organization of Internews Russia. They rented the Opera House and completely filled it. It was a stunning event. I mean, people came in their native costumes and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this was this was so powerful and so new and so vibrant, and it all revolved around Manana. I mean, she was the mother of all this stuff. And fascinating to watch them come together.
Yeah. So then they played some role in the final disintegration of the Soviet Union by being a source of news and information then.
Yes.
Yeah. And after the Soviet Union breaks up, you're there with Internews Russia and developing these networks.
Right.
Within Russia and outside of Russia, I assume,
yes.
Right? Yeah. And so then the number begins to grow and those stations begin to get more sophisticated. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like robotic stations and stuff. I mean, some of them had I went to a meeting in Russia where this, I don't know, it was really a network, but this grouping that we had because there were a few networks starting then. Ren TV was the second one. Turner started one TV6, and then Ren TV, I think, was the second network. And then, of course, NTV. NTV came to us to help them get started. This guy you see on television, what is his name now? I see him quoted all the time. He's the main pro-Putin guy on Russia.
Oh, Kislov.
He asked me for a job. He came begging for a job. I mean, we were a pretty big deal.
Right. And you were running training classes?
Yeah. All over the place. Thousands. We trained, honestly, the exact numbers I don't know, but at least 10,000 journalists we trained there.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
We were, it was a big deal. I mean, Khodorkovsky gave us $1 million. And then they crushed us. Putin crushed us, came in and disbanded it. Well, I'll tell you what happened, actually, was Manana went to see Putin, went in to meet with him. And he says to her, how come you're taking money from the foreigners? Why don't you take it from Russians?
Yeah.
And we do. She said, I just got $1 million from Khodorkovsky. Well, it was 2 days before Khodorkovsky gets arrested. You can find the date.
Okay, that's 2005, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that's that late. Okay.
Yeah.
And and then, right around, and that must have, and I'm sure that Putin had already had his sights on Khodorkovsky, and for Manana to say that was a big mistake, and we got shut down.
Yeah. Wow.
And Khodorkovsky gets arrested. Guzinsky gets chased out of Russia. It's an all-out attack.
Yeah.
I don't recall where Ella Miscavige's book stops. I know she talks about the golden age of television in Russia, which is when everything was flourishing. I'm not sure if she takes it to its demise.
So it was, you were helping these local stations develop as a professional local news groupings, right?
Yeah, doing the business side of it as much as the editorial side.
Okay, so they needed training on how to turn the media into a business.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I started to tell you, one of the funny stories was they were so proud because they had gone to Cannes. There's a big media market. It's the biggest there is, I guess. And they had beaten NTV, this group of around Manana had beaten NTV and everybody else to get the rights to Baywatch. And they didn't quite know what Baywatch was. Oh, it was the most popular program in the world at that time.
Right.
So finally they decided, no, it wasn't appropriate for them to do Baywatch. But
wow. And their idea was that would be syndicated out to all this network. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So were you in Russia, or at that time were you traveling back?
Traveled a lot back and forth there. Yeah.
Okay. So you were overseeing that office and she was running it. Is that?
Manana ran it completely. Yeah. I didn't oversee Manana very much, but but we were getting the grant money. I mean, we were the funneling, we were getting grant money. I was moving on to my personal interest was I got a huge grant, the biggest grant USAID ever did for democracy. We got a $7.9 million grant for Ukraine right after independence, which was probably a quarter of their gross national product. I mean, it was a ridiculous amount of money to have then. But we built the entire media in Ukraine. Yeah, the first news agency, the first film agency, on and on and on. I mean, we produced the national news in Ukraine for state television. I mean, it was crazy times.
Yeah. So and that how long did that last? Your involvement with Ukraine?
It's still going on. I mean, we're still a very big NGO there.
I see.
Had a big influence there. Union, the news agency, is still the premier news agency there. So things spun off, stations spun off. We had a satellite network that we lost out to Europe. I kind of put this in my novel, but I don't remember the exact names and stuff. All eventually big oligarchs bought everything we started.
Yeah, I
A
see.
simple answer.
Right. Did you have local oligarchs in Russia controlling like local news stations?
I think a lot of the local stations were owned by oligarchs, like these kind of steel mill in Tomsk that I mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, that was often the case.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And I interviewed someone involved with CTC, that network that Peter Gurry, Storytime. Did you interact with them at all?
Knew about it. You know, we were kind of parallel to each other, not directly involved in it.
Yeah, but I would.
No, he pulled off something. He, in a certain sense, as I recall, I think he beat us to some stuff that we were aiming for, and he pulled off this network.
Yeah, I mean, what he talked about was how he stayed out of politics, that it was only entertainment. He didn't do any news.
Oh, is that right? Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just the opposite. We had a program called Local Time.
Yeah.
Where we took, a couple minutes from each city, and we would show, 20 different local news programs. And that was the first time, as I was mentioning, that, Russians could find out what was happening in other places.
Right. So your focus was more on news and public affairs programs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but we wanted them to be economically viable. So we definitely, they did Baywatch. They were going for entertainment.
Right. Well, I remember there was Dallas, and there were any number of U.S., sort of serial kind of shows that were shown in Russia.
Oh, yeah.
Were you involved with any of those?
No, I wasn't personally.
But
I had a funny involvement with Dallas, actually, but that was personal, but that had nothing to do with much to do with Internews. I met the wife of the guy who owned it, who was for a while a billionaire and ended up being penniless, sleeping on her couch, his ex-wife. And he had 4 marriages, and by the end of his 4th marriage, he didn't have any money. The guy who produced Dallas.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, some of these stories are amazing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it wasn't gambling or bad investments. It was just bad life choices. Huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, but at the early 90s, that's the impression of America and American life was on those TV shows with those serials in Dallas and and Baywatch and similar shows. And who was responsible for that? I mean, that was other networks,
you really, if you're going to do this right, you'd have to look at what happened inside of Gosteleradio state television.
Yeah.
Well, who to talk to? I mean, some of these guys got murdered, but there was a big fights over Veed. Was that their name? The guys who did Vizglad.
Yeah.
The guy who got killed, Lasic. And then later there was that guy who was murdered in Washington. He was the guy, he started this ad agency. And he ended up controlling all the ad dollars going to Gosteleradio.
Whoa.
And big fights with the mafia and stuff. He ended up getting murdered. But there's a whole story about the kind of entrepreneurship happening within Gosteleradio and who controlled it. And then eventually, well, I don't know the dates of this, but basically MTV became too powerful.
Yeah.
And they were carrying a lot of these series too. They bought a lot of these series.
Right.
And Guzinski got chased out of Russia.
Right.
I think he's in it. He'd be interesting to interview, or the guy who tried to get us to do MTV. The pivotal, and I talk about this in my book, the pivotal moment is the election when they were afraid the communists were going to win the election against Yeltsin.
In 1996.
96. Okay.
Yeah, that was 96.
And they made a pact with the devil. They all agreed to back Yeltsin.
Yeah.
And I can't think of his name now. Malinowski? No. Anyway, the guy who started MTV was Yeltsin's chief, and he's in New York now.
Well, it's more detailed than I can go into in this book, but to get into what
you can get it all. You can get all this that I've told you up until the collapse of it all is in Ellen Miscavige's book. If you find that, you're going to get all the references you need
right.
for a lot of this sector.
Right.
And if you can talk to Manana, I mean, if Manana will talk, I mean, she's very careful. She can't do anything in Russia.
Yep.
She does some work for Internews in Central Asia. If she'll talk to you, and if you can interview her, it'll be one of the most fascinating interviews you've ever had, I guarantee you.
Right. So while you were doing this, did you expect that Russia would continue to be an open environment for this kind of free exchange of news and ideas while you were doing it? Did you think that?
Yeah, I'm an optimist. I mean, you always knew that at any moment everything could change.
Yeah.
Things were very tenuous there, but I never foresaw, the reimposition of a dictatorship. Basically, I didn't expect that. But then, I mean, we saw there were so many dramatic moments, like when Rutskoy led that rebellion against Yeltsin in
93.
Yeah, I mean, that was that could have been a horrible turning point.
Yeah.
So there were these. We knew it was tenuous.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt that once the cat was out of the bag, it'd be hard to put them back in.
Yeah.
And I was wrong.
And so when people, what I'm trying to get at without being whatever partisanship goes along with it was that we as Americans had a big influence on the development of the media internally in Russia at that time.
Yes.
And if we want to look at how then Russia tries to influence the US through social media to a much lesser extent, there's not I mean, it's not necessarily a moral equivalent. I'm not trying to make it.
But it's fascinating to pose that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I always had wanted to, before things got really bad in Russia, I always thought it would have been smart to get Russians to come monitor our elections. The way we monitor people's elections all over the world. I thought we should get Russians to come here to monitor our elections.
Right. Well, I actually know some who did.
Yeah, really?
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of a Duma deputy that I worked with at one time was an election monitor in the US in 2012, I think.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
There's a book.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He's a book. The problem is there's too many books here.
Too many books.
So, yeah. So
yeah, it was American policy to influence Russian television and Russian democracy.
Yeah. And was that like explicit from the funders who were giving you?
Yeah.
You knew that that's what you were doing?
Oh, yeah. We were. If you'd asked anybody from USAID what's their biggest success, they would have always said the television, the development of independent television. Yeah. Same thing in Afghanistan. They all say, the media development in Afghanistan, which we did, was their big success.
So it's an enduring success in Ukraine, correct?
Not completely. I mean, there's the oligarchs still control television in Ukraine, which is a sad thing. But we have an ongoing presence. We don't have we were practically a television monopoly in Ukraine in the beginning. At the end of the state broadcast of the news, it would say something like brought to you with the help, with the assistance of the United States Agency for International Development. And I said, take that off. You can't publish that. And they said, well, we've got to. That's the only thing that protects us from the mafia.
Wow.
We just, yeah.
Yeah. The different frames of reference there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was your sense, I mean, AID had a clear sense of direction of what it wanted to try and accomplish. And
oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Because other people have talked about other aspects of USAID being like they were giving a bunch of money and they didn't really know where to go with it, what the goals were.
Oh, I'm sure that's probably very true. There was a lot of money pouring in there.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to get the AID angle on this, you could interview the person who took over from my job, who's president of Internews now, Jeannie Bourgault, because she worked for AID in Moscow at that time. I didn't know her then.
Wow.
But she was the Moscow person directing the democracy funds.
Because, you know, part of this story is the transformation of the citizen diplomacy movement, which is into actual real influence, practical influence in the reform period, you know, in some cases into business. It's
a huge untold story.
Yeah,
it's gigantic, and television's a big part of it, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
When we started, like in '84 or so, I guess I went over there for the first, was that my first time? Probably my first time. And we could send letters to anybody because we knew the 6 people who would go to Russia and back. Hickman was one of them. You know, we knew the other 5 people who went and at the time. And by the time we were finished, there were a couple 100,000 people going both directions. I mean, that citizen diplomacy, which, by the way, I actually came up with the phrase citizen diplomacy. So I feel some ownership of citizen diplomacy.
Oh, okay.
That movement, as you know as well as I do, was just hugely influential.
Yeah.
Untold.
Yeah.
Be interesting. I would love to read your book.
Well, you know, I hope that it lives up to the quality of the information that I'm getting from people. So obviously, as an author, I want to, you know, live up to that, but find the focus of threads to pull together.
That's hard
because there are many. There are many. You know,
the story's too big and too diverse.
Yeah.
So it's going to take, you're going to have to be pretty clever to figure out 5 themes that run through all this, tie it together.